major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, proud to support the mission of KPBS and privileged to serve San Diego clients. Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, helping homeowners maintain drain, heating, and cooling systems since 1978. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
Good evening. It's Monday, November 16th. Thanks for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. San Diego is in uncharted territory when it comes to the COVID-19 pandemic. Another 833 cases today follows more than 1,000 reported on Sunday. These numbers signal the severity of the challenge ahead. There is some promising news when it comes to a vaccine developed in San Diego. We'll have more on that in a moment, and a live report on the new restriction backlash by local business owners and others. But first, Andrew Bowen reports on how the situation is worsening.
Sunday's daily case count shattered the previous record of 734 infections, which was set only one day prior on Saturday. And today, the county reported 833 cases, the second highest in a day since the pandemic began. And it's not just San Diego. Governor Gavin Newsom announced today that almost half the counties in the state would be moving into the most restrictive purple tier of reopening.
Every age group, every demographic, racial, ethnic, in every part of the state, we are seeing case rates increase and positivity rates increase as well. No longer concentrated in just a handful of counties. We are seeing community spread broadly now throughout the state of California.
Since San Diego County entered the purple tier on Saturday, some businesses have already said they won't follow orders to shut down indoor operations. Supervisor Nathan Fletcher says the county is beginning to visit those businesses, but that stricter enforcement depends on cooperation with local police departments.
We have individual law enforcement jurisdictions, and we have cities such as El Cajon that have proudly proclaimed they will not enforce any public health orders or hold anyone accountable for egregious or blatant violations.
Officials believe the most recent spike in infections could be related to Halloween parties, and they're warning ahead of Thanksgiving that people should continue to limit contact with anyone they don't share a home with. Andrew Bowen, KPBS News.
This afternoon, the county's top medical officer, Dr. Wilma Wooten, spoke about the alarming trend in new cases.
I don't think that it is any mystery why we are here today and why we called this press conference. Exactly 1 month ago, we sounded the alarm about the possibility of entering the purple tier. And last Tuesday, we confirmed that we had transitioned to the state's most restrictive tier. We had hoped that the warning would mark a change in the public's personal and collective behavior. It is quite obvious, however, that it did not. Over the last weeks, we have seen the results of what can happen when we relax our personal standards and let our guard down. We are in an emergency situation. COVID-19 is not going away, and we must act.
As much as this is a health story, it also comes down to dollars and cents. Local businesses are protesting the new purple tier restrictions. They're being forced to make costly changes to limit potential COVID-19 exposure. And KPBS reporter Matt Hoffman is live downtown where the protest is wrapping up. Matt?
Maya, that rally actually just ended down here moments ago, and say no to the lockdowns was a constant theme that we heard from people here, as some business owners just say enough is enough.
Good afternoon, San Diego. Thank you so much.
organizers excited with the turnout for their Reopen San Diego rally this evening. We heard not just from business owners impacted by these closures, but also just regular families and how things like school and distance learning is hard on both parents and kids. Many here are upset with what they're calling inept government, referring to the state of California, who they believe is putting these arbitrary restrictions on businesses when they're just not warranted. There was also talk here about resisting these orders. We do know that according to county data through early November, about 9% of cases countywide have been at bars and restaurants. Just over 1% of cases have been at churches, while less than 1% of those have been at gyms. The county did ask the state to stop those restrictions for these businesses, but the state denied that request. And facing another round of closures for indoor operations, some are saying it's time to fight back.
Businesses who followed the protocols, who followed all the protocols of the masks and washing hands, they are being punished.
So my husband and I got married 3 days before all the shutdowns happened. So this has been our honeymoon. It's not really as good as Hawaii or anything exciting like that, that's for sure. But my husband no longer takes home a paycheck. So we're relying on my income now. We're budgeting down, we're cutting down. It's not the 2020 that we imagined it to be. All of us are budgeting together. We're trying to figure it out, and it's devastating. The depression, you can feel it. Every single one of us is depressed. Every single one of us is exhausted. But at the same time, we've really just working with our community, and we're still going to put up a fight because that's all we can do.
Yeah, that was the owner of Time Out Sports Tavern, which has been open for a decade in the downtown area, but the pandemic has changed their entire business. Their restaurant seats about 140 people inside. Now, this business is complying with the indoor closure order, meaning now they just go to about 20 seats outside and takeout sales. But even outdoor dining is tough for them. Along a very busy Broadway street, cars and buses and trucks are flying by, making it very, very loud out there. Coming back out to you live down here in the downtown area, people out here protesting, basically saying, look, we saw the state change. They did modify the order to allow personal care businesses like tattoo shops and massage parlors to stay open in the purple tier. They're asking for that same relaxation for things like restaurants and gyms. We'll send it back to you, Maya.
Matt, thanks for that report. But before you go, can you tell us, what is the state actually doing to help these businesses that are being ordered to scale back?
Yeah, we heard from the governor earlier in Andrew's story. Now, the governor did say today, he was asked about that. Look, what are these businesses supposed to think? The ones that have been following the rules, now they feel like they're being punished. The governor basically said, look, he understands where they're coming from and that we have to sort of manage the storm, as he calls it. He did say, though, that they were expecting a big deficit in the budget, but that actually they have a surplus of about $10 billion. And they're going to try to do everything they can to get that money into the hands of small business owners and people who need it most.
Okay, thanks, Matt. And from the business impact to the surge in cases, we have more coverage right now at kpbs.org, and you can find all of our recent reports and see how COVID-19 is spreading in your neighborhood. Just click on the Tracking COVID-19 link and out on our homepage, and you can find the latest case numbers, and they're broken down by zip code. Stocks surged on vaccine news today. Biotech Moderna announced that its experimental vaccine is almost 95% effective. KPBS science and technology reporter Shalina Chatlani says it could take up to a year to distribute enough vaccine to have a real impact.
The news of Moderna's success comes just a week after another company, Pfizer and its partner BioNTech, announced its vaccine was over 90% effective following a phase 3 clinical trial, signaling a light at the end of the pandemic tunnel.
By the end of this year, we said that in the United States, we expect to have 20 million doses. And so I think by the end of the year, hopefully, we could start to vaccinate people. I'm obviously very happy with the number that we have at 94.5%.
Moderna Chief Medical Officer Dr. Tal Zaks says he's confident the company can start handing out vaccines by the end of the year. He told CNN the treatment should be effective for most people.
As we look at least at the phase 1 data, you see the same level of an immune response across both younger and older adults.
Results from the two vaccine producers means that Americans could be getting that vaccine soon, but immunologist Carl Ware, director of Sanford Burnham Prebys's Infectious and Inflammatory Disease Center, says there are still some important steps that have to happen.
The goals of politicians don't matter here. It's really based on science, and that's what we have to follow. We need the data. And, for the timeline we're on, the first step is to get FDA approval. And so that's actively ongoing right now. But it's going to take probably at least 6 months to a full year to get enough people vaccinated that we might be able to see, really have come out of this dark tunnel of infection.
Ware, who was also a participant in the Moderna trial, says there was a very diverse set of participants, and he's excited to see the results from Moderna's novel vaccine, which used a type of protein. He says it hasn't been done before. But one challenge is still ahead of scientists, and that's to learn how long a vaccine may be effective.
How long will the immunity last from this vaccine? That's a key issue that we want to be able to analyze. Make sure that the vaccine is stimulating the right kind of immunity in everybody.
Moderna says it plans to file in the coming weeks with the FDA so that it could be swiftly approved for emergency use authorization. Shalina Chatlani, KPBS News.
And developing a vaccine isn't the only challenge. Getting it to more than 300 million Americans brings its own logistical hurdles. Coming up a bit later, why California and other states have a lot of questions about how many vaccines they will get and when. It has been almost 2 weeks since the general election, and President Trump still isn't budging. Despite losing re-election, the official transition to President-elect Joe Biden is on hold. Karen Cava tells us how Biden's team is moving forward anyway.
President-elect Joe Biden and Vice President-elect Kamala Harris charting their response to the economic crisis sparked by the coronavirus pandemic with the help of top CEOs and labor leaders.
Once we shut down the virus and deliver economic relief to workers and businesses, then we can start to build back better than before. We talked about how we have an opportunity to come out of this stronger.
Their transition is still without key funding, security clearances, or cooperation from the Trump administration. President Donald Trump still refusing to concede and pushing baseless election fraud allegations, including one about the ongoing recount in Georgia. The Republican lieutenant governor said there's been no evidence of widespread fraud.
Proud to report that continue to not see any sort of systemic issues or fraud or improprieties.
With Inauguration Day about 9 weeks away, President Trump's national security advisor Robert O'Brien went further than most Trump White House officials Monday in acknowledging the reality ahead.
If the Biden-Harris ticket is determined to be the winner, and it's, obviously things look that way now, we'll have a very professional transition from the National Security Council.
With access to federal agencies blocked until the Trump administration signs off, the Biden-Harris team has been making their own calls to governors and public health officials on pandemic planning, including eventual vaccine distribution. In Washington, I'm Karen Caifa.
While President-elect Biden's time as commander-in-chief has yet to begin, the man he served with as vice president is telling his story. Former President Barack Obama's new memoir titled A Promised Land will be released tomorrow, and it's the first of 2 books that will detail his time as president, focusing on his first 4 years in the White House. The race for the 2nd District seat on the San Diego County Board of Supervisors is still too close to call. Former state legislator Joel Anderson has extended his lead over Poway Mayor Steve Voss over the last several days. The latest numbers just out from the Registrar of Voters show Anderson is ahead by 259 votes. Both candidates are Republicans. About 10,000 ballots haven't been counted yet, but we don't know how many of those are in the 2nd District. Parler has become one of the most downloaded apps in the United States since the U.S. election. CEO John Mates, originally from Poway, says part of the reason the app has seen recent success is due to its focus on free speech, lack of censorship, and belief in community fact-checking. KPBS reporter Jacob Ayer has more.
Parler is one of a handful of media companies with a largely conservative user base that has received an influx of accounts since Election Day in the United States. The app is seen as an alternative to Twitter, but Parler does not fact-check content. The company claims that verification will be driven by users on the platform. In a letter, Parler CEO John Mates said, "People from all walks of life, fed up with opaque, biased content curation, inconsistent agenda-driven fact-checking, and manipulative algorithms built on data mining, are joining Parler to speak free." While Parler regards itself as a non-biased free speech company, some see it as a safe haven and echo chamber for hateful and violent voices.
Free speech does not give you the freedom to slander, the freedom to incite violence, the freedom to threaten somebody else. And the concern is that that is potentially what is happening on Parler.
Since the election, Parler has seen rapid growth and now has over 10 million registered accounts. It comes as other major social media companies like Twitter and Facebook decided to clamp down on the spread of election misinformation. In Mate's letter, he also said, Facebook and Twitter's suppression of election information was a catalyst, causing many people to lose their trust, but the movement away from these platforms was already well underway. Mates also wrote, "Together we will continue to stand up to cancel culture, defy authoritarian content curation, and reclaim the internet as a free and open town square." Some other media outlets that have seen large increases in users over recent weeks include MeWe, Rumble, and the apps for Newsmax and OANN, all of which have a majority conservative user base. Jacob Ayer, KPBS News.
President Trump will spend some of his remaining time in office reducing the number of American troops serving overseas. The AP reports troop levels in Afghanistan will be cut in half to about 2,500 by January 15th. That's just days before President-elect Biden takes office. U.S. troops in Iraq would also be tightened to about 2,500. That's about 500 fewer than are currently serving. The NCAA is planning some major changes to its men's basketball tournament. Talks are underway to hold March Madness in one geographic location, likely the Indianapolis metro area. It's an effort to reduce travel and potential exposure to COVID-19. Early rounds are usually held all over the country. The NCAA has not said if it will take a similar approach to the women's tournament. Earlier, we reported on the progress for a vaccine tested here in San Diego. Once the science is figured out, the focus will turn to logistics. As Sarah Murray reports, there are a lot of questions over how a vaccine will be doled out to all 50 states.
With the U.S. on the cusp of a coronavirus vaccine, states are still in the dark about how many doses they may get. Yet another hurdle in the scramble to nail down distribution plans.
States have heard different reports about how many doses they'll get. Pfizer is saying they'll have, several million ready to go. We're not quite sure exactly how many it will be.
With Pfizer's vaccine showing promising results in clinical trials and Moderna announcing its own efficacy data, experts say a vaccine could be available to some Americans beginning in December.
It will be targeted to priority populations, mostly healthcare workers and then essential workers and those over 65.
But the alphabet soup of government agencies overseeing the vaccine effort, CDC, DOD, HHS, has states struggling to plan for what's to come. Adding to the unease, memories of severe shortages in personal protective gear early in the pandemic, which left states clamoring for more supplies and undermined confidence between states and the federal government. Once again, states tell CNN they are looking for more clarity and transparency. In Missouri, General Gustav Perna, one of the leads of Operation Warp Speed, told a top health official he knew how many doses the state would likely get, but wasn't willing to share the number yet. In California, officials say they're planning for multiple scenarios. And in Minnesota, officials say they need more federal funds to carry out a vaccination program. The government hasn't publicly revealed its allocation formula, but HHS official Paul Mango says they will take into account priority groups in each state when doling out doses.
We know how many folks are residents in nursing homes, for instance. We can get through the Bureau of Labor Statistics and otherwise information on the number of frontline healthcare workers. We can get the number of folks through, again, the Department of Agriculture and others, the number of folks working in meatpacking plants.
Once states learn how many doses they'll get, they'll decide where to direct them. Pfizer's vaccine comes with an added challenge. It must be kept around minus 100 degrees Fahrenheit, which could limit where it will be made available.
The Pfizer vaccine does require extra cold storage. It also will come in large quantities, so it will be best attuned early on to mass vaccination programs, for instance, of healthcare workers at hospitals or our skilled nursing facilities.
I'm Judy Woodruff. Tonight on the NewsHour, the U.S. breaks 11 million COVID cases and approaches 250,000 deaths as hospitals brace for a hard winter. Coming up at 7 after Evening Edition on KPBS.
Massive high tides known as king tides are hitting San Diego and the California coast through Tuesday, with tides expected to reach nearly 7 feet. King tides happen when the sun, the moon, and the earth are in alignment, and the moon is in its closest position to the earth, creating a stronger gravitational pull. Some low-lying areas along the California coast are taking precautions, but San Diego is not expected to see major flooding as a result of the extreme tides.
And right now we do have the king tide, but the surf isn't quite
big enough to where it's going to make that drastic of a impact on the coastal erosion.
Last year, king tides in Imperial Beach caused a bit of beach erosion and some street flooding. The next king tide event will occur around December 13th to the 15th of this year.
Temperatures will be tumbling slightly over the next couple of days as the onshore flow returns, so it'll be turning cooler for Tuesday into Wednesday. It looks like the whole week temperatures should be a little bit on the cool side, so we're saying goodbye to our warm air. And with the return of the onshore flow, we'll be looking at more in the way of morning coastal clouds and fog. And there you can see our cooler temperatures will be following through the week. For tonight, we'll see some clouds right near the coast coming back at us. Temperatures tonight, 45 Oceanside, San Diego 56. Borrego Springs at 52 and Mountain Laguna at 45, and we'll dip down to the mid-50s in El Cajon. Now, during the day on Tuesday, a trough will be approaching, impacts central northern California, and for us, we'll see the return of the onshore flow. So we'll see more in the way of morning coastal clouds and fog. Temperatures in the mid-70s Oceanside and in San Diego. Nice, though, in Ramona and El Cajon, we're in the 80s. Borrego Springs is at 86 and Mountain Laguna at 65. Now, as we take a look ahead Wednesday, well, that trough will be coming into central California, but really not a lot of impacts here except for the deepening marine layer. So we'll continue to see cooler temperatures, and we'll see more in the way of the morning clouds. So Tuesday, not as warm, and then cooler Wednesday, Thursday, and right into Saturday with clouds in the morning and then some sun in the afternoon. And as we check out the inland areas here too, still fairly warm Tuesday, not quite as warm, and then temperatures start to drop off right into the weekend, and we'll see some clouds at times here too. Checking out the mountains, temperatures will dip down from the 60s into the upper 50s with just a few clouds. And as we take you to the deserts, temperatures will drop just a touch from the mid-80s to near 80 by Saturday. And for KPBS News, I'm meteorologist Mark Mancuso.
At around 8 o'clock tonight, miles above planet Earth, a new batch of astronauts will arrive at the International Space Station.
3, 2, 1, 0. Ignition.
The 4 astronauts lifted off Sunday night from Florida's Kennedy Space Center. They're on board the SpaceX Dragon capsule. This is the first fully operational mission for the California-based company. Part of the 6-month mission will involve growing plants, which is considered a key part of any future travel to the moon and to Mars. Thrill seekers don't need a trip to space to make history, though. A woman has done it right here in California, climbing one of Yosemite's most famous landmarks in record time. Melanie Wingo has more on her daring journey.
Yosemite National Park's El Capitan, a behemoth rock formation whose sheer vertical face makes it a draw for rock climbers the world over. Tahoe City's Emily Harrington is one of them.
It was not certain that I was going to achieve it until I reached the top.
But reach the top she did, setting a record in the process.
I was the first woman to free climb the Golden Gate route on El Capitan in a day.
And becoming part of an exclusive group of women to conquer a feat of this nature.
And I was the 4th woman overall to free climb any route on El Cap in a day.
Aside from the obvious challenge scaling a 3,000-foot rock formation presents, Harrington needed to get beyond her past attempts to climb the Golden Gate route in a one-day time frame.
It was something that was really extremely difficult for me, and I've failed at it 3 times before.
But her determination, as solid as El Capitan itself, is built on her love of the sport she became hooked on immediately at the age of 10.
It sort of just felt like I belonged there, and all I wanted to do was climb after that point on.
Motivated by the 4 women in her sport, she's pleased to be a role model now for others.
It feels pretty special, actually. It feels pretty special that young girls do look up to me and are inspired by me and the things that I've done.
And no doubt inspired by what she overcame during one of the more challenging parts of this climb when Harrington lost sure footing. a slip that sent her careening into El Cap's unforgiving granite surface. Bloodied from a head wound, but undeterred, Harrington rested a bit, then got back onward and upward toward her goal of reaching the top, saying she's not a big believer in beating her nerves or conquering fear. Rather, she prefers to work through those high emotions to help her focus.
For me, it's just about accepting those emotions and understanding that they're never going to go away, and I just have to learn how to deal with them is really the trick more than anything. It can be uncomfortable, but I think the outcome is worth it.
The outcome for Harrington, an ascent a half-mile straight up from where she started in 21 hours, 13 minutes, and 51 seconds.
That was Melanie Wingo reporting. Hollywood has been inspired by the climbing of El Capitan. The 2018 film Free Solo won the Oscar for Best Documentary Feature last year. Here is a recap of tonight's top stories. Stocks rose higher today on COVID-19 vaccine news. Moderna, which conducted trials in San Diego, says its vaccine is nearly 95% effective. Pfizer announced similar news for its vaccine last week. The news comes amid a major spike in COVID-19 cases here in San Diego and across the country. Meanwhile, local businesses are speaking out against tighter restrictions. San Diego entered the state's most restrictive zone, known as the Purple Tier, over the weekend. It largely affects restaurants, gyms, and other businesses that operate indoors. Many of those business owners took part in this afternoon's demonstration downtown. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thank you for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Have a great evening.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, proud to support the mission of KPBS and privileged to serve San Diego clients. Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, helping homeowners maintain drain, heating, and cooling systems since 1978. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marcos Shiley. And by the following: and by viewers like you. Thank you.